Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning ride is okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, wellness coach and well-being expert, Darlene Marshall. And normally I start off the show with some kind of framing meta idea when I've got a guest on to invite you into a higher level of thinking and conversation. But maybe I'm just not that clever this week, or there's two reasons I'm not going to do that today. The first is I think our guests have so much to share with us that I don't want to spend time on what I think. I want to hear what they have to think. And the second is I have a little teensy bit of a confession. And they haven't heard me say this before, but when I first talked to our guests 5.5 years ago in the Wayback Machine about their work, I want to confess that I didn't get it. At the time, I really felt like the big keys to well-being were all in how we lived our lives. They were about our personal habits, our personal meaning, and it wasn't really about work. I was like, oh, okay, more stuff about work, fine. And maybe it was probably because I had had a big burnout myself. And I will say up front, I was definitely wrong in these last 5 years, hearing them speak, seeing their work evolve. My own personal experiences in relation to work has completely changed how I feel about this. I can see that I was backwards. Flip that coin. And now I also see how a lot of my work has become about how to fuel oneself for what makes your lives meaningful. And for some people, that's going to be work. Well, you probably picked up on a theme here. My guests today are the authors of Meaningful Work: How to Ignite Passion and Performance in Every Employee. Now, the book itself is about leadership and fostering meaning, driving meaning at work. And this one little meta idea I want to call in at the top of the conversation. If you are a coach or a fitness professional, you are a leader. Now, some of you are going to be also leaders in your gyms, in your teams, in your groups, but also in your clients' lives. So even if you are not a leader at work, I think there's so much that you can get out of this book, because so many of us are, what's that? There's a joking line about like, you got the managers, you're doing the manager's job, but you're not the manager's title, right? There's lots of us who are leaders. We are cultural leaders. We are thought leaders without being explicit leaders. So I want to invite you to listen with that critical ear of non-traditional leaders. And if you're a longtime fan of the show, you might recognize our guests from back in October of 2020, long before we were on the NASM podcasting network. They had just finished their initial work, and it was so exciting to get to be the very first person that interviewed them on a podcast about meaningful work. And now they're back to share with us where that work has taken them. Wes Adams, Tamara Myles, welcome back, my friends, to Better Than Fine.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to have you back. It's also just good to see you because obviously you're my friends and I love your work, and I'm so excited and so proud of you to have this in my hot little hands 5 years later.
I love that you've marked it up and you've got your little Post-its.
Post-its of my favorite stories and the things. Before we hopped on, before you got on, Wes, Tamara had asked me what was my favorite story from the book. And I really appreciate, not only do you talk about storytelling in the book, but you have so many great stories that enrich the learning, which I feel like there's a lot of big ideas, but you bring them to life. So we'll just start out with my compliments to you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
So let's just start with, a lot of people think that they're only going to have meaning in their work if their passion. I know I was raised in the generation that was like, do the thing you love and then you never work a late day in your life. And at the time it was theater. I used to be an actor. That ruined costumes. It ruined acting for me. I lost all of my passion for the thing I used to love. So I always think that that's bad advice, but also you unpack in the book, it's not necessarily true, right? So let's just start there with finding meaning in work doesn't mean that I have to go work for a charity or work in the arts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the biggest myths of meaningful work is that meaningful work is reserved for certain helping professions, or like you said, the arts, or something that you are passionate about, saving the world, for example. And what we find, what we found in our research and in many other meaning at work research is that meaningful work is not just about what you do. It's not just about the work itself, but it's about how you experience the work. And we find that every job can be meaningful through three main pillars. And that's what we explore in the book, what we call the three C's of meaningful work. And those are community, contribution, and challenge. And so these are pathways towards meaning. And when we find those three C's in any job, work can become meaningful.
So even if I am someone who is stocking shelves, I'm cleaning floors, I've got, my my brother is a construction worker. He's a large crane operator. I know he gets a ton of meaning out of his work. It's really not about the what I'm doing. It's about these three elements. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. We can,
yeah,
oh, sorry. Yeah, I was
please
going to
no,
say
go
we
to
could
town.
have moments of meaning in every job, every day, if we know where to look, and especially with the guidance of a great leader, which is one of the things that we talk about in the book. And I appreciate that you mentioned some of the jobs that you did, because there are stories in the book about janitors, hairstylists. Tamara and I also do consulting work, and some of our clients are in the construction and manufacturing industry. And there are very meaningful moments for a lot of these folks throughout the day. So yeah, this is not something that's confined to people that work at nonprofits or people that work in healthcare or things like that.
I want to jump in
Yeah.
that just today, I was on the phone with a client in the insurance business, and this particular client works on data entry, right? And so he manages a young team, entry level career, so 1 to 3 years, and their main job is to enter data of demographics of their clients, right? And so they spend their whole day just entering data. And then so I asked, how do you experience work? How do you find meaning or help your team find meaning? And he's like, oh my gosh, I love my job. What we do is so important because we are there for people on, the worst days of their lives, when something happens and they need to access their life insurance or their disability insurance, or they're retiring and they need their annuity. And he just explained, and he's like, and then I help develop my team because I know, we're entry level, but I want them to have a long career. And so I force them in 1 hour a week. They need to work on themselves. And he just went through all the things that we do in the book. And he finds his job in data entry at an insurance company deeply meaningful, where a lot of people might be like, oh my God, that's such a boring job, right?
Well, I think that also speaks to like different strokes for different folks, right? Like all of us have different talents, different interests. And I'm jumping ahead. I guess we're going to go backward in our order on the C's here to challenge that it's what is going to grow me? What do I find interesting and compelling? I guess this is kind of the Venn overlap of challenge and contribution, right? Because I want to know that I'm doing something that my skills, my abilities, my interests can continue to grow, but it's also that I'm giving something of me to the work. And again, I'm just going to keep singing your praises, not only because I both love you both, but I love this book. As someone who comes from a blue collar farming, working, construction, nursing, these really jobs that I feel like for so long were devalued in some parts of our culture, to see them highlighted in your book as anything can be made meaningful if given the rich soil to grow in. And there's not a question in there anywhere, but I'd love to hear if either of you have thoughts you want to add.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think that it was really important to us when we were doing our research around this. We've been doing research on meaningful work and the leadership practices that make work meaningful for a number of years now, as you know. And, we looked across 27 different industries, all across the board, and, talked to thousands of people, surveyed thousands of people and hundreds of leaders. And what we found was that these three C's, community, contribution, and challenge, hold across all of those industries. They hold across generations. They hold across any demographic groups that you can think of. So these are kind of the core driving pillars of meaning that all of us share. And I think, first of all, that's I think really exciting because it's something that bridges all of us. We work with a lot of organizations that are kind of struggling with people that work in different departments or different generations. And this is really a great way to sort of bridge those things. And I think it's something that's common among all of us, no matter where we work or what we work on.
Oh yeah, it's really human. Like a lot of the things, the stories in the book jumped out to me for I come from a community, I come from a family that work is important. It's not something that people have to do. Oftentimes, we're self-employed or you work for a community organization. Work is a human expression of how we contribute. And you really bring that through in the book. And I love it for that. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. My guests are my friends, Wes Adams and Tamara Myles. They are the authors of Meaningful Work. And we've alluded to these three C's. Let's visit each of them a bit because I think there's so much depth we can plumb. Let's start with community. Can one of you unpack for me, when you talk about the C of community, why does that matter when we're talking about meaningful work?
Sure. So community is the belief that we belong and can show up authentically, right? We can be ourselves and we can also share our true ideas, right? Without fear of repercussion. And so community really says, I matter here. We feel seen, we feel connected. There's multiple ways that leaders can increase this feeling of community for people at work. And in our research, the number one question that we asked that predicted a strong sense of community was, does your leader care about what's happening in your life outside of work? Not does your leader know, but does your leader care about what's happening in your life outside of work? And, of course, we did the study from a leadership perspective, but I want to go back to what you said in the intro. The way that we define leadership is influence. And so even, if your audience, they're trainers and they might not be a direct manager of someone, but they have influence on their colleagues, the other trainers that are in the gym and their clients, right? They're people that are trusting them. And so it's that feeling of creating community. And one simple way to really do that is to ask people about what's going on in their personal lives, but then remember and care and follow up and
Don't
say,
just ask.
Exactly.
And then listen to the answer, like actually pay attention. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. Maybe you both have seen, we have a colleague, MJ Shar, just posted today on LinkedIn about her experience that her father-in-law had passed away and that they missed being by his bedside by 10 minutes. They had rushed to be with him. Yeah. It's a great post.
I didn't see it. No.
Yeah, to go read the post. And also to our listeners, go follow MJ. She specializes in kindness. She's going to be on the show later this year. She's wonderful. But in it, she describes the way that it has become obvious to her in his death that people weren't really listening and that people didn't really care. She talked about being in meetings where people would ask, like, how are you doing? And then as soon as she finished the sentence, be like, okay, well, this is what we're here to talk about, and jump right to whatever the agenda was of the meeting and not even let it land what she had shared. And it jarred me. I know I think you both know that I just had a death in the family, and to have that feeling like you didn't matter because no one was actually listening, just what a bomb to drop on someone's well-being and the feeling that they have meaning, right? Because we want the contribution piece. And my heart breaks for her and for anyone who feels like their influencing leader, as opposed to their managers, just don't care about them, which I think is a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think, um one of the things that gets in the way, I think, is people feeling uncomfortable, right? This like level of discomfort with negative emotions and not knowing what to do with somebody who just lost a family member and is sharing their sadness. I think that gets in the way. And I think that we don't all need to have, licensed therapist skills to have human skills, to care and empathy, to just listen and to say, gosh, I'm really sorry that this happened to you. Tell me about your dad. And, is there a story that really exemplifies who he was? You can just listen. And then the other thing I think that, you know, people miss often is, usually in a work environment, people share good news and something positive at a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 times more often than they share something negative. So, we're more comfortable sharing something exciting or positive or gratitude than we are at work, sometimes sharing something deep. And those are also moments where we can really build connection, right? When somebody shares something positive, whether it be like, oh my gosh, I won a ticket to go to a concert at a radio show this morning on the drive-in, or whether it was, oh my gosh, did you see the sunrise this morning? It was beautiful. The sky was pink and orange and it was amazing. So it could be whatever it is. But if the person is sharing with you, you can be present and care about those things as well. And you can say, wow, I didn't see the sunset. Tell me about it. Like, I wish I had seen, did you take a picture? And you can still engage with that moment in a way that's caring.
And also that doing that builds the relationship, right? It's not just a nice to have, it's the deposits in the emotional bank account that build this sense of community and belonging that you're saying is an essential ingredient if we want people to show up feeling this connection of meaningful work.
Absolutely. It's not about just what we do, but who we do it with, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that sentence.
Mhm.
You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. My guests are both in positive psychology research at the University of Pennsylvania. They've had clients like Microsoft, KPMG, Mass Mutual, Tamara Myles, Wes Adams, and we are talking about how do we drive thriving through meaningful work. So we've talked about community a bit. I know I kind of breezed into contribution and challenge as my community of this dog keeps shoving herself up under the mic. For those not watching on our live stream, we live stream at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday afternoons, and you can always catch Princess shoving herself into my right hip. Let's talk about contribution first. What does contribution mean in the terms of meaningful work? Because I think a lot of people think it's just like I show up, I check my boxes, I do my job. What more do you want from me? But also people want to feel like they have a meaningful contribution, right?
Absolutely. If community is about feeling like you matter, contribution is believing that your work matters, that you're actually impacting others in a positive way. And this is where meaning and purpose sometimes get confused. Purpose is really about having a destination, having a goal, being intentional, moving towards something. And contribution, the sense of contribution that you get comes from seeing progress towards that goal, from understanding how you're moving towards that purpose. And so leaders can help people find that sense of contribution by helping them understand how their work ladders up to larger organizational goals, how it matters to others in the organization, or impacts customers potentially. And a second way that we get contribution that we don't talk about enough is just positive feedback from our managers, from our peers. Just a simple thank you or a good job. We've been talking a little bit about, trainers. I have a session with my trainer right after this. And one of the things that I notice when I'm with him is, just like after I've had a heavy set and he's like, good job, like it's not even that, he's just like, he's pretty broy about it. And he's like, oh, that was good, and I'm like, yes, I did it, and I want to do more of that. And I feel like I accomplished something because it was recognized by someone else. And, we know from recent research from Gallup and Work Human that one thank you once a week is enough to cut disengagement and burnout in half. right? That is such a simple but
Yeah, such a
highly
small dose.
powerful leverage point for managers. I mean, it's huge, and less than 40% of people in that study felt appropriately recognized for their work, right? So these are simple, easy things that help people find, these are moments of meaning that we can give people very easily for, little to no effort or budget, that really have a huge impact.
There were a couple of things in the book that you just alluded to that I want to highlight that jumped out for me. One, I so appreciated that you disambiguated purpose to meaning, because something you point out in the book, not only are they talked about like they're the same thing, but so often, whether we're talking about employers or we're talking about coaches, right, we're focused on the purpose, the long horizon, but imbuing meaning into the process, like you highlighted the feedback from your trainer, but I also wonder, because he's your trainer, I bet he does do this for the coaches and trainers that are listening, making it clear what the efforts we're doing now seed to the outcomes that this person wants, so that the things that feel repetitive, because in long-term training, long-term coaching, there's going to be things that are repetitive, there's going to be themes that come up, that they don't feel asinine, they feel meaningful, because you can see how they create the progress that you're trying to earn toward whatever it is you're working for. So I really appreciated that in the book, and I appreciate you bringing it up now, and how it then comes to life in that way, that you understand that what you're doing isn't hollow.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think there's the one thing that we say is contribution activates purpose, right? That's one way to think about it. It's like when you understand that contribution towards the big goal, towards the thing that's not going to feel hollow, you still have to understand how all those incremental things that you're doing, how, the data entry name that you're entering, each email, each thing that you're doing, how does it add up to, the client who is going to be able to have insurance when there's a death in the family, right? Like somebody has to make that connection for you if you can't make it clearly. And I think positive feedback is a way to do that. The beneficiary contact. I mean, there's different ways. And Zach Mercurio, who is one of our research partners on our study, he uses a sentence starter, and he says, if it wasn't for you, right? So if you can tell someone every day, hey, if it wasn't for you, XYZ, hey, if it wasn't for you, the gym wouldn't have been ready for my client because I was running late, and I really appreciate you setting it up and getting it all cleaned up. Hey, if it wasn't for you, and just saying that, sprinkle it around, because it's just such a great way to express gratitude, recognize the kindness that there is in the world. And it creates a virtuous cycle, because it's not only wonderful for the person who receives the feedback, but it also makes you feel more energized, makes you feel better by giving the feedback too.
Well, I'll take this opportunity then to express to you both that if it wasn't for both of your individual encouragement, I know I wouldn't have this show right now, because there were definitely times when we were in our grad school year that you both gave me encouragement or resources that I needed, that I would not have had the courage to start the show. So thank you both, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here right now. And I also want to shout out to Breakthrough in the chat, has been sharing this phrase of measurable and meaningful in response to our conversation around contribution, that if we can see these incremental steps, we can see the growth, and that helps to contribute meaning. So thank you for being
I'm
in the
just
chat.
reading the chat, and like the alliteration is amazing. Human health span, measurable and meaningful, incremental to infinity. I love it.
Understands the assignment. Yeah.
Thank you.
I love this, and I think actually this is a nice transition to challenge, to this like meaning we get from learning and growing and expanding our capabilities. And I think like another thing that I do with my trainers, we track all of the workouts, right? So every week I track the sets, I track the weight, and I can see the history, right? And so I can look back and see like, oh, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, I've made huge progress towards then. Since then, towards whatever my goal may be, right? And we want to be able to see how we're learning and growing and improving ourselves. Burnout often comes from just doing the same thing over and over again without seeing how it's making a difference or how we're learning and growing as a result. And so we need to, as leaders, push people a little bit. I mean, that's why people get trainers in the first place, right? Like if I could just do this on my own without a push, I probably would be doing it. But one of the things you get from a trainer is, just like I work a little bit harder. I have someone who's nudging me outside of my comfort zone, but also at the same time supporting me in reaching those things. I'm like, oh, bro, I don't know if I can do that. And he's like, yeah, we're just going to try it. And I'm going to be here to spot you in case you drop the weights or whatever. But it allows me to move beyond my current capabilities in a meaningful way. And so I think we see that at work, also giving people stretch assignments, right? And also supporting them in their efforts to, move outside their comfort zone and expand their skills.
Yeah, every fitness professional who's listening is going to recognize these themes. And for the people who aren't fitness professionals who listen to the show, this concept of challenge, incremental growth through fitness, it doesn't happen. You don't get an adaptation without challenging like the literal tissues and your neurophysiology. You won't change. You will not just plateau, but eventually if you just keep doing the same thing indefinitely, you begin to revert. You have losses because you're so well adapted, the body tries to conserve resources. So the other thing, reading the book, and I'm like, oh, I know these ideas and I know the audience is going to get it very fast.
I think we used like a muscle analogy somewhere,
You do.
right? Where yeah.
Yeah, you definitely do in the challenge section.
Yeah.
Can I say one other thing too? Because one of the things Tamara and I do when we're consulting and working with new groups of people is we ask them what some of their most meaningful moments at work have been. And, we've done this so many times now. And I would say I'm going to ballpark it at around 80% of the time, people are sharing a moment that was hard, where they really challenged themselves. That was difficult. That wasn't necessarily fun during the time that they were doing it, but they look back afterwards and they're like, wow, that was meaningful because I was able to pull off this thing that was really difficult, or like I really connected with my colleagues through this crisis, or I saw how I was able to contribute to other people on the team or our clients, even though it was really difficult. People aren't talking about, oh, it was easy, I did this and that was really meaningful. It's those things that are tough that really give us the most satisfaction.
Yeah, I think we're in a weird moment now where there's a subset of society that thinks that they don't want to be challenged at work, right? Like this kind of like push to a soft life. And though many of those people are also languishing. And you challenge me if you think I'm off base here. But I do think that some of it is this anxiety about being challenged and being stretched, and recognizing that we need meaningful ways to contribute, but we also need ways to grow. And oftentimes work can be that thing if we let it.
I have so many thoughts on that.
Yeah, please. I bet you have more thoughts than me, please.
So Scott Barry Kaufman just released a new book called Rise Above, and I read it. I actually owe him an email to let him know I loved it. But I think it's a book that we need right now. It's an important book because it talks about this victimization mindset that is pretty prevalent in our society right now, where people are kind of afraid of discomfort, afraid of ideas, right? Afraid to be disagreed with. And I think it's exactly this, like we're afraid to take on challenges. What if we fail? And, it could be so many reasons. It's maybe parenting, maybe the trigger warnings, maybe whatever's happened on social media, the echo chambers and all of that. But it, meaningful work, just like meaning in life, often comes from the struggle. Just like a muscle doesn't grow, right, unless you push it and kind of make it uncomfortable, you're sore the next day. It needs that to grow. It's the same for us. And that's actually one of the misconceptions of meaningful work, that it's the same as like pleasure or happiness. So we'll just buy everybody free lunch every day and offer free dry cleaning, and then work's going to be really meaningful. And actually, those are different things. Those things create moments of, positive emotion, maybe moments of joy or gratitude, but they're different from meaningful work, which often comes through the struggle that causes us to grow.
And something worth doing that struggle for, right? I think
Right.
the order matters, right? That you
Mhm.
feel a sense of belonging that allows you to feel safe, right? Like safe to fail. You have something that's worth trying for and stretching for, and then the challenge comes, right? Because like this is worth it. I'm going to grow, and I have the resources and people around me that want me to win. You use I'm like looking at my tabs to find the right reference of there it is, pushing and supporting. I love this
Yes.
image that you have of one hand's on the back and one hand's on the elbow, so you're getting shoved but you're getting held up. I was like, yeah, this sounds like personal trainers too. Like, we're going to push you, but we're going to make sure you're safe while you do it. Because that, I wonder, you talk about Scott's book, and he and I were just at the New York Times Wellness Festival together talking about this very thing of, he knows my story. He knows how I grew up and some of the challenges I've been through, and that I've been more open about talking about it, definitely on the show. And he's like, well, why do you think that you don't have a victim mindset? I was like, it wasn't an option, because the choice was staying on the dirt road and staying on food stamps and never doing the things that, fortunately, I had my family pushing me. No, you're going to go to college. You're going to get out. You're going to do these things because you're capable of it, even if it's going to be hard. And it meant that sometimes they were also really harsh with me. And what they said, I'm not going to drop the F-bomb because Eric will fire me. But what they would say was, we wanted to make sure that nobody could bleep with you, right? Nobody could push me in a way that I couldn't handle. So they pushed me to be more and made sure that they had my back if I needed them. And so I think you really are onto something here with this recipe of support, belonging, give me a reason, and then push me, because that's how we actually get somewhere together.
Yeah, in our zone of possibility matrix, that where high expectations meets high support, we came to that through our own research. But then when we were looking at other studies, particularly in parenting and in education, it tracks so much. So there's a style of parent. There's like 4 styles of parenting on a matrix, kind of like that. And the one that tracks with the zone of possibility one is called authoritative, not authoritarian, which is one of the bad ones. But authoritative is exactly that. It's like where you have high expectations of your kid, clear high expectations, right? And you also support them. You show them lots of love, lots of affection, but you have the high expectations. And then there's research in education, and I forget exactly, what the research is and what the matrix says, but it's very similar. And so I think it's really important for us, no matter if we are, interacting with people at work, if we are parenting, if we're interacting with colleagues, if we are a coach, to really have high expectations, to see the best in people, to see a future for them that they may not even see for themselves yet, and then push them to get there. I think there's research on feedback. And it's called the magical feedback. And they looked at, what impact does feedback have on effort? And this was with students. And they had essays that were graded, kind of harshly, and like a lot of red ink. And then one group had this was the experiment group, had a post-it from a teacher that said, I'm giving you this feedback because I have high expectations and I know you can reach them. And then the other group just had the exact same kind of feedback, but the post-it said, I'm giving you this feedback. I'm giving you these comments so you can have feedback on your paper. Kind of very neutral. Not surprising, the kids who got the high expectations, and I believe in you, you can get there, worked much harder. They improved their essays much more, right? And so it's amazing when somebody says, like, I see potential in you. I know you can do this. This is going to be hard, but I got you. What help do you need from me?
Yeah, those were my favorite teachers too.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. My guests today are Tamara Myles and Wes Adams. I'm going to clear my throat because I'm losing my voice. We're talking about thriving through meaningful work. And I want to switch gears to something else that really jumped out to me in the book, and we've alluded to it a little bit. you discuss authenticity and how important authenticity is in the book. You call it covering. I always heard of it as masking, but this idea of not feeling like you can be your authentic self. And I know it's something that I have struggled with a lot. And I'm very curious to hear your thoughts and to unpack them a bit about how leaders of all different kinds, right, not just managers, can encourage the people around them to bring their whole selves to work. Because I can remember I worked at Equinox. I know, Wes, we've even talked about you used to work out at the one I worked at. And I was a mentor. I was a leader in the club. I ran the team at Soho for a while. And one of the things I struggled with the most was getting my trainers to be authentic, because oftentimes they had clients who were very affluent, very accomplished, and they felt diminished and like they had to mask.
Hmm.
And I could tell that if they were their most authentic selves, that they would resonate more. They would be able to bring their client more openly into the session and help them more. And I'm very curious to hear, how do we foster that sense of safety that allows people to show up as they are? And also, what do we do if you're the person who feels like I'm not safe? I'm the person in an environment that I can't be my authentic self. How do those people show up and still find this sweet spot of meaning when they don't feel like they can uncover in that way?
This is a really big challenge now, I think, especially because so many of us aren't in the same room all the time anymore. And so we tend to transact with each other rather than build authentic relationships. And, going back decades, there's a lot of research on the impact of covering or masking or whatever you call it. This we borrowed from Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy, the idea of having a second
Yeah.
full-time job, right? You're spending all this extra energy figuring out how to fit in, making sure that you're not saying certain things or that you are saying certain things, right? And that's
It's
energy
exhausting.
it's exhausting, and it gets sucked away from energy you could be putting into your job, right? Like, I'm gay, for example, and I've worked at jobs where I'm like, ooh, can I say that? Can I talk about, like that part of my life, or is that going to be acceptable there? And so you think about covering, and there's a lot of energy that goes into that and a lot of brain space that goes into that really takes away. So even if you're just looking at it from a purely productivity perspective, it's damaging to
Yeah.
the work that teams are able to do. And I think, we're moving into a space very rapidly where what worked yesterday isn't going to work tomorrow, right? Like, things are
Mhm.
changing, things are chaotic. We have to come up with new ways of doing things. We have to be creative. We have to innovate. We have to bring new ideas to the table. And if we don't feel like we can show up fully as ourselves, we're not going to bring the ideas to the table either, right? Like, we need the most human of human skills right now. Like, the
Yes.
innovation, the creativity. And so leaders are really responsible for creating the space for people to show up authentically and inviting them to the table. And I think we've already talked a little bit about, asking people what's happening in, over the weekend or whatever. And these are things that are built in a lot of small moments, right? One, you're of course familiar with Vivek Murthy, who spoke during our grad school experience together, who was the Surgeon General of the US for a while, has a practice he calls Inside Scoop, where at the 5 minutes at the beginning of each weekly meeting, one person is invited to bring in an object or show a photo or something that is meaningful to them and just talk about it. Hey, here's the photo of when I went hiking with my dad and it was really meaningful because of this, or, oh, this is a shawl that my grandmother knitted for me and I keep it on my couch and it
Mm.
makes me think of her, and that sort of thing. And it's an invitation to kind of bring a little bit of yourself to the table, and that sparks opportunities for connection, right? I mean, they're like, oh, my grandmother also knitted, and or I went hiking, or I love hiking, where did you go? And you start to see people as more than just what they can do for
Job
you
title.
next in your job. And that really creates cross organizational collaboration. It deepens relationships, it builds loyalty. And yeah, it's just so critical, and has to be so intentionally developed now. You can't just assume that it's going to happen at the water cooler.
And done consistently, right? And
Mm,
not just consistently like, oh, we do it every week, but with all different types of people across the organization or the team. Because another thing that you sparked in my mind just a moment ago, but is in the book, was talking about alignment. And thank you for obviously feeling comfortable and bringing up like, okay, you as someone gay. I remember at Penn, I used to call it in my head passing for affluence. I felt like people couldn't
mhm,
know that I was poor. And at the time I was working as a personal trainer, living in New York City, barely paying my bills. And the cost of failure was going to be moving home and living with my parents, which happened during the pandemic lockdown anyway. But I felt like I had to pass because this was my chance to get
mhm,
out of the cycle that I now see has been the cycle of just blue collar people having meaningful work for many generations. Right. And I thought that I couldn't bring that to the room because then people wouldn't include me, which I now know is totally me stuff. But I think that you mentioned, leaders choosing to invite people in as themselves, but it's also the alignment of the actions, right? Of making sure that it's not just lip service to welcome. It is, you are welcome, right? You
mhm.
are included, you do belong. And I think that's a lot of what you allude to and sometimes overtly talk about in the book that is invaluable in a world where you say like what worked yesterday is not going to work tomorrow, but also we're getting more and more siloed in our ideas, and work is a place
Mhm.
where you can bring people to a common cause that they also have to be human together to accomplish effectively.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Right.
think that's one of the beautiful things about work, and I think you started by saying like, "Oh, I didn't really resonate with their ideas at
I
first,"
didn't
because
get it.
for me
I
and
get it now. I didn't get
right.
it.
And the thing is like we're not saying you should get all of your meaning from work, right? But we spend a big chunk of our time at work. And so we really believe that that time should be meaningful. We shouldn't just sit there watching the clock, waiting for the day to go by. And in our workplaces, it's like one of the rare opportunities that we have to interact and exchange ideas and work together with people from completely different backgrounds, different ideologies, different belief systems. And so the way that we can, capitalize on that exchange is by welcoming those experiences, those ideas, those differences into the table, because that's where we get all the benefits, right, from diversity. But I think the challenge is it's exactly what you're saying. It's not only like, okay, once a week in a meeting, we're going to do this thing and then whatever. But as a leader, I'm going to continue to cover because I don't really feel comfortable, but I'm going to let everybody else bring their stuff in. That doesn't work. Right. You as a leader, you have to set an example. You have to role model. You have to create that alignment so that other people also feel comfortable disclosing, sharing, bringing their photos in, bringing the knitted blanket from the grandmother in. And so we have a practice in the book that we call everyday storytelling, and that can be, your Zoom background can have different items. Your email signature can have the book that you're currently reading. At the start of a meeting, you can say, "Oh my gosh, my weekend was so exciting! I went to my kids' lacrosse tournament." And now you're disclosing that part of your parenting. You can even put it on your calendar. I'm leaving work early today because I'm going to catch my daughter's game. And those little moments of role modeling is what really makes it okay for other people to bring their whole selves to work as well.
Can I say I
Yeah.
love that practice of putting things openly on your calendar, because like I came from an environment where you would just like hold or block or just hide those things, and I think it's so cool to openly say I'm going to my son's wrestling match, or I have a doctor's appointment, or whatever the thing is, right? And just be a little more transparent about the fact that what, I'm human too.
I love it. I love it. And I think to circle back on that is that I think that some people perceive that as like gimmicky or false. And when as a leader, whichever type of flavor of leader you are, you're doing it because like, oh, I read this leadership book and it says that I should do it because then people will find meaning. It's like, no, be the person. Just be a person.
It's funny how
And then
often
that's
we
permission to person, right? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that comes up always. People are like, when we talk about feedback or when we talk about authenticity, people are like, well, isn't it going to feel fake, or it just doesn't feel right if I'm like thanking people all the time for their work. Aren't they going to get annoyed with that? Right.
Step one, mean it.
Yeah. Right. And that's it. Right. Sure. If you don't mean it, people are going to be able to tell. Right. And if you don't actually care about your coworkers, they're going to know, and maybe you shouldn't be a manager. But like, think about, really how you want to interact with people in the world, and whether you want to have real relationships with people. And it's okay if you're a little uncomfortable about it. It's usually much more about the person being uncomfortable than the one that the other person feeling weird or awkward or whatever.
Yeah, I always think that when people react really negatively to any of the well-being stuff as like, oh, it's hollow, it's this, whatever the criticism is. And I'm just like, well, you're saying a lot about yourself right now.
Mhm.
And it's fun to pop that bubble and dismantle it. But it's also like, if it's not meaningful, it's because you are not doing it with authenticity. Let's look at that together.
Yeah.
Um, we are running out of time, and I want to make sure we don't run out of time to say thank you. Thank you both for making the time to come back on the show. I'm just going to plug the book one more time. Meaningful Work, Tamara Myles, Wes Adams. I love it. I'm not quite through with it. I'll own I didn't make it all the way through. Had a lot going on, but from what I've gathered, I've got these sticky notes on it because they're notes to my mom, who is a VP of perioperative services for a major hospital network. And I'm very excited. I'm going to give it to her as soon as I finish. And they're the
Oh,
things that have
awesome.
jumped out to me that I think are going to help her. So thank you both for another tool to give her. Where can our readers find your work, or listeners, excuse me, your future readers, but our listeners right now, where can they find you?
So we're both very active on LinkedIn and on Instagram. We're always posting new ideas, findings from our research, tidbits from the book. So we'd love it if you followed us there. And then if you go on our website, which is makeworkmeaningful.com, you can find the resources that we mentioned in the book. We have models for giving feedback, for uncovering moments of meaning, lots of great resources that you can go and download for free. And you can also take for free the assessment that shows you where you are on your journey to being a meaning-driven human.
Love it. Can you say your Instagram handles for me, please?
Sure. I am at Tamara Myles, Myles.
And I'm at Wes Adams with the number 1 at the end.
All right. Thank you both so much. Love having you on the show. And of course, I would love to hear your feedback, dear listener. So you can email me. It is info@darlene.coach. You can also find me on Instagram. That's darlene.coach. My website, wait for it, it's darlene.coach. Easy to find me on LinkedIn as Darlene Marshall. If you're a fan of the show, I hope you have already subscribed. If you haven't, you should do that. Likes, comments, shares, all the things. Tag me when you do them. Feel free to join me and Princess here on YouTube when we live stream on the NASM Podcasting Network every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves and be well.